Hey Acers, welcome to Ace Role Playing Games Club this week, and I'm your host Mason Emerson, and I am just happy to have you here. It's wonderful that you join me every week. And in reference to a comment that I received this week, it's absolutely true. I do hate my camera, but I can't quite afford to get a new one, and until I land me a new gig, I'm still going to be unfortunately for you guys, stuck on this camera, but that's okay. As soon as I can get enough money to be able to get myself a decent camera, I'm going to. I only have decent audio because I accidentally landed an opportunity to get a decent microphone and I just followed somebody's advice. So, here's that microphone. It's pretty cool actually. I've been able to keep it off camera and I've been able to get really good pickup. It is one of those corroded, however you say that word. I don't even know that I know how to say that word. But that's okay. This week, I did have a cancellation that I was going to, because I was going to run a game yesterday for a friend of mine, but I've had a little bit of a cold coming in, and I did not want to share that with them. That's one of the best things that COVID did teach us, is it's okay to cancel. And that's maybe the first lesson I want to throw out there to you as game masters is it's okay to cancel when you have a sore itchy throat and you're like, this is probably a cold, not just allergies. Now if it doesn't go away in the next couple days, I'm going to just write it off to allergies. But considering my wife and my daughter both are knocked down with a cold right now, I'm pretty sure it's the same thing. But I've got a pretty tough constitution, so I'm still going to keep going. Although I did sleep till 11 o'clock today. Take that for what it is. And that's just another bit of side advice here. Take care of yourselves. Try to actually not stay up too late. And even though I'm a night owl, I always have been. I always have been. I mean, like I remember in high school, I completely remember going to my bedroom at like 8 or 9 o'clock. But I stayed up until 3 or 4 the next morning. There were a couple times I might have even stayed up the whole night and not gone to bed because I was reading a book. I remember specifically one book when I was in high school, and it was a Tom Clancy novel. A buddy of mine had lent it to me. I read that thing in one night. It was that good of a novel. And we want our stories that we tell in role-playing games to be that cool too. To be so exciting that the players and the game master are even going, oh, I wonder what's going to happen next. I wonder how this is going to play out. Because we as game masters, we set the what of the role-playing game, and the players, they tell us how with their player characters' actions. So for part of this, I'm looking at there's a really good, and I've complimented it before and I'll compliment it again, in the Savage Worlds Deadlands Noir book. There is one of my favorite adventure generators that I have ever seen. And that's because ultimately almost all role-playing game stories are mysteries. You can skin them however you want, but at their core, they're a mystery. There's something that's happened, somehow the player characters get involved, and then there are clues to tell you who did what, where they did it, and why they did it, and how. And that is part of what I wanted to just talk a little bit about today. And so I pulled up my nifty Rocketbook. And like I've said before, Rocketbook, you can't see the cover on this one very well, but that's because I was showing you the back cover anyway. Rocketbook, there you go. Rocketbook is just a handy tool to have. Now, I'm going to actually go to the middle of what I was writing down before, but just try and get this up on camera, and I'm going to talk about it to those who are just listening to this. And these are completely, and they should be listenable, because it was podcasting that got me into being a game master as a role-playing gamer. I finally clicked when I listened to those other guys podcasting. So here's the classic, if I can get it to show up on camera. No, it's not showing up very well. But anyway, the classic plot triangle, or the plot arc, but it's always been shown to me as like the just two sides of a triangle. And that, of course, starts with the inciting incident, goes up to the climax, and comes down to the denouement. Cool, funky French word that I was actually taught how to say initially. And that is how plots in books often go. And of course, there's little variations to either side. Sometimes, if this one will show up, um, that's kind of more what it looks like. It looks more like flames because you're going to follow the initial point of the plot. You're going to start with that, but you're going to follow what the players decide to do, and you're going to go way off target. But ultimately, what it comes down to is, do we have a goal as a group as to what we're going to be doing with our overall story time? Because we are taking 4, maybe 6 or 8 hours of our weekly time, or even just once a month or whatever. We are taking that time and we are spending that time with friends. We're spending that time telling a story together. And so, in 1, 2, 3 hours worth of what used to be a normal length movie, or in the case of like Dune, if you're doing it in 2 Dune pieces, 6 hours of play, what is our goal? What is our goal of the session? What is our goal of what I call the scene, which is the first digestible size of the story? And ultimately, what is the size of our, let's call it an epic, let's call it a series, we call it a campaign. That's the term we use in role-playing gaming. And that is because we will have an ultimate overall goal. Now, that goes into the session 0 stuff, which I don't know that I have actually covered session 0 in my long format videos yet, and I should. However, I'm just working towards that, and maybe I'll retouch on it if I have touched on it. But of course, the ultimate reason why we have the session 0 is to establish the lines of communication between game master and players, and then you as the game master are now going to help your players decide what kind of story they want to tell. If they say, and I'll just use an example of the story that I'm running with I'm running this with teens, and I had a great idea for mashups. Now, let me set this way back, going back to that podcast first. When I first heard about this adventure, I decided I had to play it. It sounded like so much fun. And that is the pulp adventure, Rocket Nazis on the Orient Express, by Triple Ace Games. Now, they don't do Savage Worlds stuff anymore, I don't believe. But Wiggy Wade Williams is one of the classic luminaries of Savage Worlds writing, and he wrote a bunch of stuff back in the day. And he, I believe, he helped write the pulp toolkit and other things for Pinnacle. But then he also wrote his own pulp. This is how you get the pulp feeling, and he wrote a setting called Daring Tales of Adventure. Now, Daring Tales of Adventure and its sister settings of Daring Tales of the Space Lanes and Daring Tales of the Sprawl, those ones are really great setting books to kind of get your mind into what are we playing here. And that's pretty good stuff. It's pretty important stuff. But Daring Tales of Adventure, he wrote several adventures, and he wrote an overall story arc for these characters that he created, and they're excellent pulp characters. I took it and I adapted it to Suede as best I could with newer characters, and I generated a whole bunch of characters for people to choose from at cons and things like that. And I would use this as a con game. But now I've started running this with the teens because we needed a second GM, and I'm trying to train up the second GM because my daughter has now graduated to advisor status, and technically I should be trying to spell her off of being the active GM and try to bring in another teenager to do this. And this is a good, just overall trial for me, as I realize I want to try and make sure that the ones leading the games are going to be the teens themselves. So I need to try and find another teen in the group who would like to learn how to game master and use Discord and things like that to train them. And that's part of what these videos are for. They are for a deep dive for you new game masters who have come in and are learning how to game master, so that way you can run your own table. And that's really ultimately what my goal is. I'm going to actually move my camera a little bit here. I've been going for 10 minutes and I just realized I had my light still in the shot, and I apologize for that. Anyway, my point here is that I get Rocket Nazis on the Orient Express. And then recently, of course, in the last year, I got my hard copy of the Superpowers Companion. And I realized that basically pulp heroes and level 1 superheroes are almost interchangeable. And with that in mind, I decided to run Rocket Nazis on the Orient Express for these teens. And they're three of my squirrely ones. They're three of my newest ones, and they're really smart. They're really good kids. But I wanted to get them a chance to get a feel for good role playing. And it's also the table that I use to introduce other grown-ups to Savage Worlds and other things like that, so that I can show anybody who's there at the store that night Savage Worlds. Well, anyway, I took these two ideas and mashed them up. And now I'm running Rocket Nazis on the Orient Express with superheroes. And that means I can actually crank up the danger a little bit. I can add more Nazis in to see more mooks to be fought, but also to get in and actually give the players a few good couple thumps. And that's what I'm after. But the goal of that overall story is the player characters want to stop the Nazis from launching a missile on downtown Paris. So there's a whole bunch of other stuff layered around that. And what you start with is that's going to be the goal. Now, you might not actually openly state the details of the goal, but the goal that we state with our players on our session 0 is the goal that we state with them is we're going to have an adventure where you as level 1 superheroes are going to be fighting Nazis in 1934. That's all the detail that we need to give. Now, you as the game master need to know your end. What is going to be this point that signals the end of this overall story arc? And then you start working backwards from there until you get to what is often referred to as the hook. And the hook is what brings the players in. The hook brings you back, like Blues Traveler used to say. And they get hooked into the story by something peripheral. In the case of Rocket Nazis, it's an old World War I buddy who comes in and he pleads for their help. He has been being followed by Nazi thugs, and he's in New York City. And he has to find a Dr. Davenport who used to be there, but now he's missing. And Dr. Davenport is one of 7 other scientists, considered crackpots by many, who's into rocketry, robotics, and explosives and things like that. Just aeronautics. These people have been disappearing around the world. And Bertie has caught on to that the Nazis are doing something. He doesn't know what they're doing, but the Nazis are doing something, and he needs your help to find this Davenport guy. But the problem is that Davenport is not in the country anymore. As a matter of fact, your player characters are going to catch up with him in Vienna as you find out the itinerary. Oh, that's something I got to add to the prop. Now, I gotta pull this out here. There, I have a prop. I'm gonna pause for a second while I look for it. Okay, I found it. It was actually in my gaming bin and not over here in my other stuff. But anyway, okay. Anyway, this is the prop I was looking for, and I put this prop together. I've got to go on and find what the route of the Orient Express was and add that to this. But what I did is I made a prop written in pencil of when people went missing and things like that, and this actually, if the players take the time to read through it, it tells them everything they need to know. So there's Dr. Nathaniel Davenport in Brooklyn, New York. And it tells the story of everything that's happened so far. I even dated it with like European style dating and things like that. And like here's his investigation notes. Now he gets interrupted while writing his notes here. And this is the part that I showed this to another game master, and he really appreciated the effort I put into this. He's even got a shopping list in the back of his journal here. Bog roll, that's one of my favorite ones, because bog roll is your is a toilet paper roll, so he needs toilet paper. But anyway, the point is that I've been trying to get to here, that you now get this prop after a chase through Central Park. So that is where I have focused that goal, that overall goal. I've broken it down into like the parts of how they're going to get it. It's actually broken down in the thing, and I break them down into what we call acts, or some people can call acts, because acts encompass a whole bunch of scenes. And scenes can be anything from one night session to a session that goes multiple nights. But you want to try and have an end goal in your mind as to when does this section of the story end? When can we compress time and go faster? Do that red line on an Indiana Jones map. Because, I mean, Lucas and Spielberg could have shown everything that happened to Indy on the plane. This drink cart girl coming by, the Nazi keeping an eye on him, and everything, and Indy not being aware of it. They could have shown that, but all they had to show was the Nazi flipping the paper down, getting his eyes on him, flipping it back up. And now we know that he's being watched by the Nazis as he flies from America to England and makes his way over to Cairo. So that's the way we need to look at time, because ultimately, as the game master, your job is time management. Your job is to keep the team pointed toward that goal. Doesn't mean keeping them on the rails till they get to that goal, but it keeps the team on the way to the goal. Now, we accept in a con setting, in a convention setting, we accept that it's going to be a lot more railroady. And we're going to have exactly those beats that we've already planned out happen. But in a looser campaign of a role-playing game, we just are going to let it go where the players take it. Because in other, like in doing mysteries and stuff, the advice that I've given before and that I've been given is don't try and be clever. Don't try and have a whole Rube Goldberg adventure, but instead go ahead and just have the basics of what's happening. And then, as you have the basics of what's happening, let the players adjust the path. I spoke in my short today about the idea of a train on rails, but a train on rails still has springs so it can go side to side and up and down. So we can vary around, and more do spirals around that overall plot path. So just have a plan and let the players affect it. And if the players don't engage with your story, if they don't engage with the overall plot, you can take a pause and say, hey, are we just playing the wrong kind of game here? You just need to make sure that you are being the best, most responsive game master of what your players need. And communicate with them. Get feedback from them. I've mentioned these things before. But ultimately, we have a goal, and the story will be over when the players either triumphantly fail and the missile launches on Paris and the train crashes into the station, or when the players are absolutely triumphant and they stop the missile and they stop the train, and the Nazis have and the head Nazi has either been completely defeated or he has grabbed a spare rocket pack and jetted off into the night, screaming, "I'll be back," knowing that now your players have a recurring enemy who will be back and will be trying his hardest to destroy the player characters. Now, another example is there's a one of the and no offense against Ed Wetterman and his crew because I love those guys. I love my Pinnacle people. They're all great. But I think one of the weaker adventures or weaker Savage Tales in East Texas University when you're doing the Degrees of Horror campaign is the I is there's one called Midnight Snack or something like that. I don't have it up in front of me right now, but basically it's one where the players encounter a vampire. Well, actually, he's not a vampire. He thinks he's a vampire because he saw someone else get attacked by a vampire, but he passed out. So he thought he got bit too. And so he thinks that he should be a vampire, but his fangs haven't grown and he does start going out only at night and he lives in the cemetery and he is since his fangs he goes and he orders some and gets them at a costume shop and he just puts them in himself. But since his fangs really don't work, he uses a knife to stab people and drink their blood. But it's also very not very satisfying and he's kind of getting sick from it, so he ends up going into like diners and buying dinners and eating a lot. And that's where he encounters the player characters. If he gets away, he can become a nice nuisance and a stalker to the player characters, and that's what I've had him become. So I was able to adjust kind of a weak sauce story that doesn't give the players much to investigate or go on into something that's much stronger now. So that's really what I wanted to make as my point in this episode. And I too started off with an initial goal, and I'll probably come back to these notes because I have some good notes here, and I want to keep talking about how we develop our stories for our players, or with our players, I should say. But I initially started off with a goal, and I kind of went where my thoughts took me on this. It's kind of stream of consciousness, but not at the same time. And I hope that this has given you some good ideas, though, on how to help set an overall campaign goal with your players so that you can vary around that goal. Like I said, you've got your goal. It's kind of a straight line from where they are to where they're going to be. But the real story are the spirals around that goal as we keep moving forward and closer to that goal. So until then, remember that I do love you. You're amazing. The world is a better place because you're in it. And you are an absolute wonder to behold. And you are going to contribute so much to this world. And I look forward to seeing you at my table.